Welcome everyone. Welcome to another episode of Son of Elijah. My name is Mac the Lion and I'm your host for this program. We continue our series on Satan's toolbox, also called the witches toolbox, because Satan uses witches as the powers of darkness, instruments used as human spirits that he could utilize in order for him to transmit and do his workings on humanity. But this is the content that is coming from Satan himself, transmitting through witches for the destruction of mankind. So we continue our series on the witches toolbox, or Satan's toolbox. And with these things that we are exposing here, we will be able to understand why there are many things that people do and why they do it, and the complexities of the wickedness that is at work in the lives of many. Now, yesterday, or would I say in our previous episode, we talked about being notable. There are people that were created by God to be notable. And because they are meant to be relevant in their community, they are meant to be relevant in their environment, they are meant to be relevant in their city, in their town, in their nation, there's some level of notoriety that God has scheduled for them to attain within their lifetime. But unfortunately, they've been hijacked, ambushed, mutilated by the dark matter, which came through the timelines of manipulations, which came through the timelines of either the abandonment or the abuses or the curses or the vulnerabilities that were around them at that point in time, and created the opportunity for the enemy to invert them and then corrupt them into a state of badness, which is now responsible for them being vagabonds and functioning outside the best that God has scheduled for them. Now today we are going to look at another group, because we are dealing with the 7 specific dimensions of Satan's execution of his toolbox, and the 7 dimensions of individuals as they function within the parameters of the lines wherein they are meant to operate from. Now for today, I would like us to address and look into the second example here, or the second parameters, or the second dimension of that which we are looking at, our vertical lines of dimension of which we are looking at. Now for that, we are going to examine those who are called into being aesthetic. We started by saying that those who are called to be noble, those who are called to be notable, those who are called to make a mark in their generation, those who are called to bring some type of relevance to their dwelling, to their community, and to all those who are around where they were born and they were raised. So that is the first one. Now the second one is another group of people who are called into being aesthetic. That means those who are called into exceptionally represented in the visuality of the beauties of God. You see, God is beautiful. The Bible calls it the beauty of his holiness. And the beauty of God's holiness is what reflects the very exceptionality of the heights of what it takes to enjoy the celebratory capacity of God, the laudation, the celebration, the exaltation, the beauty of God, because God is beautiful to behold. Now, by extension, there are those who are meant to represent the depths of the beauties of God and the physicality of life. And as a result of that, you would always identify them very easily, because they are well represented visually. They are aesthetically represented visually. They look good, as it were, even from their birth, as it were. They are lookers. They are visually appreciative when you look at them. They're aesthetic, and you could always tell by looking at them, you could always see them and immediately identify that to be the case. There are individuals who are called, both male and females, who are called into the world of being aesthetic, and you could always see everything that they represent, the beauties of what they represent, the essentiality of what they represent, the color, because they always function in an environment where anything they touch, anything they wear, anything they adorn themselves with, they appear to be elegant. And that elegance comes almost naturally, just with their presentation, just with them, just having it. You could give the same clothes to some other people and you won't like it, but once you put it on them, they become like a standard or a model of it, simply because of their exceptional and because they have a visual representation of themselves. Another way of putting it is that you could say they are visually kind, if you may put it like that, because of some level of laudation that is always following through on the fact of their looks or their beauty. Now you need to understand, I'm going somewhere with this because there is an industry also that is well represented in that area, be it those who are in pageantry, be it those who are in the beauty industry, whether it's cosmetology, whether it's clothing, whatever it is. You see there are people who function in that industry and then they represent and they create a standard wherein people look at this clothing and say, I would like to have a copy of this, I like to own this, I like to have that, simply because they model for the institutions who produce those things. So it's a department that God himself created. It represents the beauty and the aestheticness of God. It represents the visual representation of colors and the things that has to do with presentations, that when you look at it, it's well appealing, well recognizable. Also, it is also represented also in when it has to do with also music, because music in itself, it's a type of visual representation. If you look into the realm of the spirit where someone is playing the piano and all that, you'll be seeing colors flying, because the note you are seeing is the vibration of melodic flow, which is rooted in representation of colors, which you cannot identify with your visual eyes, but if you are in the realm of the spirit, you see that aesthetically. So these are individuals who are called all in that industry. So be it in sports, you also see that, because the sport has to do with celebration, adulation, excitement. So people who are like that bring a lot of excitement. They're usually very extrovertial, in their personality wise, even in the world, they'll say, oh, this person is the life of the party. You've heard that term being used, because these individuals, when they come in, they light up a room, simply because their visuality is always the centrality of what makes them what they are. So they feel a lot. They are very relatable, and emotionally they connect very fast with people. They can always connect very quickly, and they meet someone today, before you know it, they know the person so much. They always have friends, they're always friends oriented and all that, So a lot of that is characterized by that visuality. And they also play sports, because a good number of them are into sports, because all these things are things that are very visual, all these things are things that are very well represented. Wait, before we go any further, please, could you just over there, you will see the like button, just tap on it, because that helps the algorithm. And while you're at it, if you've not subscribed, just go beside there, you see the subscription button, tap on that also too. That will help us to be able to stay in your ecosystems anytime we upload new stuff. All right, thank you. So let's continue where we stopped. Now, when it comes to do with the aesthetic representation and the beauties and the elegancy of God, as God tries to channel that aestheticness through the lives of people, in scripture we call it a blessing. In short, when the Bible talks about the book of Revelation and it talks about the dimensions of God and it talks about the blessings of God. So when you bless God, you are celebrating him for what? The beauty of his holiness. Because holy living and the exceptionality of that holiness is beautiful in itself. And that beauty in itself is what God tries to represent physical through humans who now express that in our world. And that's why there are people who will look at and say, oh, this one is exceptionally beautiful, simply because of the gorgeosity of God from which that is represented. It has nothing to do with who their parents is. Even their parents may have no visual representation, but if it is their calling, through their bloodline, they will extrapolate all they need in order for them to be visually appealing. That's why even in those days, they were pageantry. The Bible talks about the fairest in the land who was always being chosen, either to be, to a wife for the king or a wife for the prince and all that, because they were always celebrated. That's why even in the Old Testament, the queens were always like that. They were individuals who, not just their status as the daughter of the king, but also the fact that their visual representation, because the pomp and prejudice that has to do with their elegancy has to also be appreciated. Remember in the Old Testament when the king requested that his wife come in and then let all her beauty be fully admired and let her resonance and the laudation of her physical appeal be aesthetically exceptionally expressed at a very wide, because the Bible said the king had the lords and all his leaders and everyone. He had from over 110 visage all over the planet. They all came together, they converged for a major convention, as it were, in the land of the Persians. And then the king requested wanted that the wife, which was the queen, to come forth, and so that all can, gawk upon her, as it were, and appreciate, the excellency of her beauty and the majesty of her representation. But what happened? She declined from coming. And because she declined, she not only repudiated the kingdom that she represented, but then she lost her value, because that was part of the essence of her being there. No one was going to call her to come and give them strategies for a war or how to deal with the affairs of the kingdom. She was for that. Her beauty was what she was placed there for. And when she could not live up to the one assignment she was given, her throne was taken away. And of course, we know how the story ended up, because it was Esther that now won that pageantry, and she was the one who took that. So there are individuals that are called onto being aesthetic. Now, that aesthetics you can always tell because of the visual representation. So even as a parent, you can always tell which of your child. I remember I was talking to a father one time. He said, "No, all my girls, all my daughters are beautiful." I said, "Yes, but that one." And the reason why I said that was because I was trying to isolate the fairest of them all, because there's a reason why I was saying that. And it's part of what I want to also express to us today. You see, Satan wants to spoil that which is excellent, that which is gorgeous, that which is beautiful. He has an assignment. He actually has an agenda, and he will not stop. And unfortunately, he is damaging them at an alarming rate, and we need to pay attention to how he does it, so that even as parents we can protect not only our children, but especially those ones that we have come to isolate them as being visually aesthetic. Because if you pay attention to many of them who come under that class, they normally are not exceptionally smart in the classroom, simply because it's not their calling, because their visual representation is their asset of navigation on this earth. They are usually not exceptional in the classroom. They are not usually the smartest. They are not the sharpest razor on the desk. Neither are they the sharpest knife in the drawer. The reason is because their calling and exceptional representation would always be visual. So they will function perfectly in the beauty industry, in the modeling industry, and things of that nature. But Satan has an agenda. Satan has something he's doing on the earth today. So he knows those individuals. He isolates them specifically. Then he tries to invert them. I saw a vision one day in an encounter I saw where the devil sat down, and he was literally taking note of everyone who was called within that aestheticness, within a community, within a nation, within a state, within a province. And then he had an agenda on how he was going to make sure each and every one of them was inverted. And by that mutilation, he will produce an end game. And that end game, unfortunately today, is what is feeding the sex industry, the sexual calm industry, the pornographic industry, the immoral industry, the call girl industry, those who are selling on the streets, or every type of sexual fetishes and immorality. They are all tied to that singular agenda of Satan's mandate of inverting the beauty of God's holiness and making sure that these individuals are wounded and damaged and ruined. So at the end of the day, they are reduced. What started out as something that should be elegant like a queen or a princess of beauty will now be reduced to the skirmishes of filth and immorality and the extraction of lustful pleasure, because the originality of their creation from God was to represent the holiness of God. That's why the Bible calls the beauty of his holiness. And by the visual appreciation or the visual kindness that they represent, when individuals are able to behold them, they are able to appreciate the God who created them, and of course the representation of the life and the value and the elegance of their existence. But unfortunately, Satan is working night and day to mutilate that. So Satan has also a dark matter that is designed for that, and the end game of it is one word, and it is irritableness. Satan wants to turn those who are aesthetic to become highly irritable. So they are highly irritable, and that irritableness comprises of the following. Number one, they become easily triggered, because something will be happening to them whereby they become easily triggered because they are easily irritated. So if you see someone who is somewhat exceptional or somewhat, beautiful to behold, and you see that they are easily irritated, trust me, something has already exchanged in them. The value system of preserving and equating that value of which they were exceptionally given is now what is being converted and downgraded into the status of being now irritated. Because you see, people on that frequency to a certain level are meant to be highly relatable, because the Bible says two cannot walk except they agree. So agreeability is something that should come very natural to them, and that's why by nature they are extrovertial. by nature, they are very, expressive of themselves. And as a result of that, they connect with people very quickly. And if you misunderstand it and mischaracterize it as something that is exceptional to you, you will miss it, because many a times that's how they are nice to every other person who comes around them, simply because they become over time very used to catching people's attention or being paid attention to because of their visual representation. You have to understand that. So they connect with people, and that's why when you enter some companies or some institutions, they are normally placed at the forefront, either as a receptionist or someone that is a greeter for that institution, or someone that is like a people person who's able to bring in, clientele for the institution, because of the fact that they are easily connectable with people, as it were. So when they market or they function in any environment where they are trying to connect with people, they connect very quickly. Which people who are introversion or people who are into themselves, that doesn't work. Introversionality and things of that nature connects or works better with people or individuals who are geeks or nerds or people who are really into themselves. They prefer to read a book. But those who are on this other end are not like that. They get their joy more for presentation. So some of them end up to be good cooks, because cooking involves some level of presentation. Some of them also ends up doing sports, and because of the alignment of their bone structure and their agility to function and play, the inclinations of that representation. So people watch that sports, for the pleasure they get from just seeing those individuals function in that environment. All this is very vital to what I want to lay hold. So there's presentation, there is also comedic value that some of them do represent, who are also well represented in that area. There are others, it's a question of entertainment. Some are very good actors, actresses, and that's why some of the best actresses in the world are also some people who are visually appealing, as it were. And if you notice some of our A-listers, it's like that. It's almost a natural inclination. They can act, they can remember their lines, they can play different characters, they can emotionally display themselves as should in that industry, and then they express it flawlessly, easily. They can move, with the flow of the accents and make all the necessary changes in order for them to play a role or act or be in drama or presentation. And then they function all well and dandy. And then we come down to designs and color. Some of them are into decor, some of them are into design, some are into making clothes or fashion and on all the shaping and everything that has to do with it. So all those things are all the aesthetics of God in its originality, which now becomes their instrument of negotiation in the physical. And that is what God gave them for relevance on the earth. Like I said, they deal more with fine art than any other thing. So anything that has to do with the fine details of visual representation is where they function best. And as a result of that, is a calling and is a real thing. And there's nothing wrong with it as far as you are able to modestly carry yourself and operate within the confines of that modesty. And then, of course, you are able to represent the elegance of God and the beauty of God. That was one thing we really missed with all the monarchies going away. Because in the time where the world was shaped and ruled by monarchs, it was an exceptional thing for the princess. She was chaperoned. No male could come near her in any form or way. She wore specific colors that was royal, well represented. She was taken everywhere and brought back. She was a standard for the nation, a standard for the kingdom. So all the young females in the land all looked up to her, wanted to be like her. And she was raised to talk, to behave, to carry herself with poise. So that poise was brought down to the common man, the common folk. And that's what the dream of all the little girls then, to grow up and be like that princess. So I want to be like princess this or princess that, princess Catherine of Monaco or princess of Wales. All these were mindsets that were scheduled during the times of the monarchy. But having had most of that gone today, Satan has found a way to deprecate the standard of young females now seeing images of uncleanliness, immorality, obscenities, and all the filthification that is beheld in our social media today. You see individuals who originally started their journey as individuals who could be aesthetically appreciated even from a younger age, but as they begin to look into the social media, begin to see all the things that the older generation of females are doing, gradually they are now being deprecated, and the beauty of what should have been the excellency and the poise of the majesty of the value of God and the high altitude that goes with it Now, but rather, what are they now settling for? They are settling today as whores. They are settling today as tramps. They are settling today as women of the ninth hour. They are settling today as cam girls. They are settling today as prostitutes. They are settling today as call girls. They are settling today as escorts. They are settling today as individuals who are offering sexual favors for resources. They are settling today for all kinds of deviances, BDSM, debaucherous behavior. They are settling today for pornographic actors. They even call them porn stars. All these things I'm talking about is all the functionality of the workings of the wicked one, taking away that beauty and now inverting it and now corrupting it and now mutilating it and now making it into something that is terrible and bad and evil in our world today. And those individuals who are already on that path of that depreciation, being powered heavily in this generation by the corruption of social media and everything that is, occurring. So a lot of young girls have a lot of images, and of course the females are the ones who are at the higher end of it. There are also males who are also victims of it, but much more females than male, just because of the fact that the word beauty is a word that is attributed to the feminine as against the masculine. Now, this has become what is very prevalent in our world. Now, individuals who are on that trajectory normally struggle with being highly irritable, and their irritability is always rooted in a bad attitude. So when you see that some of them may be good to look upon and appreciated, but once you interrelate with them, then you begin to extrapolate the very bad attitudes that is rooted in some of them. Know that the devil has already gotten there, and once he has gotten there, he inverts them. And now with the supposed feministic movement that tells them to have a whole face, that tells them to go out there and be womanly empowered by having sex with anyone they choose at any time and enjoy themselves and abuse their body and just be on the pill to make sure, and even if the pill doesn't work, they should not waste time to deprecate the child in their womb and kill it off very quickly and then pick up from where they stop. So they just tell them to blow through it, that you have to understand they must not become a pick-me, they must not be involved in the artistry of the pageantry that brings out beauty. Even they've mutilated the pageantry, now it has become something else, and they are bringing in people who are originally males and they are now calling themselves trans, and now they're inserting themselves into the pageantry, thereby filthifying it and now making it odious to the originality of what it was meant to be. Because originally, even in those days, there was always pageantry, but it was more of some of the most eligible bachelors of the land, finding potential suitors within those confines. And that was how it was, because then it wasn't because people then did not marry women basically to come and work or labor, which is not the originality of God, but of course to give them descendants. So when a man says, I'm attracted to one of this, or because she's appealing to me aesthetically, what he's trying to say is that I would like to harvest her genes and then have them in my descendants because I like what I see. That is what is designed, and that was the originality of it. And then of course, for that to become possible, they would have to have conjugation, but that conjugation must be preceded with a wedding and a marriage. You see, and so that was the process. But now Satan comes in and says, no, you can go ahead and have the conjugation, but you don't need to have the marriage that leads to it, and you don't also need to produce descendants as a result of it. Just do it for the pleasure of it, and by that it creates lust and destruction and distraction, and that destruction accelerates the demise of the female, as it were, because now she's now providing sexual pleasures for individuals. It's called lust. So lust is the extraction of pleasure and the destruction of the one who is being extrapolated from or extracted from. That's what lust is. But that was not how God designed it. God originally designed it to be a thing of attraction, that is to bring about some visual satisfaction to their generation by the fact that when people look at that beauty and say, this is the standard of the land, or this is the standard of our community. I remember I watched a documentary of how they were going to Siberia, and a lot of the biggest modeling agencies in the world go to Siberia to get young females for them to be on the catwalk in Europe and all that. And I kept wondering, how can a place so cold where people are indoor more than half of the year, how can they produce some certain line of visual lines and aestheticness that is appealing to an industry? Even though the way some of those institutions treat them, I don't approve of it, because I know that at the end of the day they end up taking advantage of some of these young impressionable females and put them in a pathway that is negative at the end of the day. But if you minus what the world has done with it, there is always a place where a lot of aesthetic value is found. Exceptional maybe because of the facial lines, maybe because of the facial representation, maybe because of the lineage that runs concurrent in that community, or maybe the bone structure, or maybe the height, or whatever it is, and then it produces those aestheticness that becomes the representation for the rest of us when it comes to do. So when clothing lines are produced, these are the ones who wear it as a standard, and then the elegance and the poise of that dressing is now what people look at and say, okay, I would like to have this, I would like to, so this is our swimwear for this year, or this is our clothing for this line and whatever. Now, if you remove the worldly part of it, those things have no problem as God designed it in its originality. But unfortunately, as mankind and the devil being the one at the helm of it, he has mutilated and brought in deprecative institutions like the porn industry, like the sex industry, like the OnlyFans industry, the OF industry, like movies that has a lot of smut and obscenities, movie industry, the Hollywoods of our world and all that. So these are the industries that are attacking night and day, mutilating, filthifying, making sure that those who fall into that class will never be able to accomplish in fullness what God originally designed for them in the beauty of holiness, which is being appreciated, functioning in an industry very clean, simultaneously becoming a wife to someone who desires them much more than others. And as a result of that, the aesthetic representation brings gladness and satisfaction to the one who has wedded them and made them a wife in the confines of a home, wherein now they produce descendants for that one, and based on that production there's an institution called a marriage, and that institution in itself, with the production of the little ones, are now being raised as godly children, functioning in society with morality. And of course, because that's what gives you satisfaction, that's what gives you agreeability, that's what gives you the love and the joy of having that wife and having the children, then a man is content, stays within that, raises his family, and is happy with what he has. And that's how God designed it originally. And now these individuals have, of course, a tendency to function within an industry, like in the beauty industry and things of that nature, be it in hair beauty, be it in visual representation, be it modeling and whatever it is, but or even sports or whatever it is, because they bring joy and excitement, and they are good to behold when they are represented properly, be it in stage plays, be it in dancing, be it as a ballerina. It doesn't matter which industry, that all falls within this aestheticness. It brings gladness to humanity. That's what the Bible calls the blessing of the Lord. That's what it means. Not the blessed. No, that's a different word. It's a different Greek word for when the Bible says the blessings or the blessing, and that's a teaching for another day. But the Bible says bless the Lord. Anytime you see the scripture that says bless the Lord, it's talking about the laudation of God as it regards his beauty, or the beauty of his holiness, or the aestheticness of his holiness. And that's what gives us satisfaction, where we tell God that we are content in him, we are satisfied with his love, with his pleasure, because you can't handle the volume of God's aestheticness, his beauty, his life, his light, his joy. All those things are part of what makes that exceptional dimension of God, and that elegance of God, and that class of God, because it's a classiness that only God delivers. It's a certain level of elegance that only God represents, because our God is classy. He's a king of the universe, and the beauty of the Lord is what now God is trying to represent through some individuals on the earth. Now, Satan's desire is to make it smart, to filthify, to put it down in the dumps, to make a mess of it. That's what he does. And that's why Satan now is doing everything he can to fill the earth with so much filth. People converting sewage parts to sexual parts. All these are workings of the wicked one to create smut out of that which is originally designed by God to be a thing of beauty. You have to understand carefully what I'm trying to say. And these individuals, from a very young age, Satan already isolates them, and then he tries to see how he can molest their existence and make them irritable. And that irritability, you would already see it by the bad attitude. You will see it by some of them, supposedly, even though they may be visually appealing, are now easily triggered. You will notice that some of them are moody. One day they are happy, another day they are not. These are all the signs of someone that has already been irritated. So if you have a child or you have a ward who is under you, and you start seeing some level of quietness, that immediately, if it is touched somehow, it produces a bad attitude, or the person is suddenly outbursting, being triggered or easily disgusted, disgusted, always disgusted. And when you see that all those things are happening, please note that they are hurt. They are hurting because something has happened to them. And then you need to dig a bit deeper, especially if you're a counselor or you're a woman that, of wisdom, and you start noticing something. You say, no, something is going on with this child. I need to dig deep. And if you dig deep, trust me, you will find that something has already happened to them, because Satan already plans to molest and abuse and trigger and mess them up even from a childhood. So you will notice that they are irritable, they are easily triggered, they are easily disgusted, because the dark matter is actually what is there. You see, when the devil takes away their innocence, he immediately replaces it with his substance. Satan will never take your gold or your value or your stars without replacing it with something. And the immediate replacement of that is the dark matter. And that dark matter, like I gave the example of that woman or that lady, I took that substance out of her life. Immediately I took it out. I saw clearly that that thing was carrying data, because when I put it in the water, I saw the data. And this is part of all the data I'm sharing on what I saw. So I saw the group of people were aesthetic, but Satan has ambushed them and made them irritable. And because they are now irritable, they are easily triggered, they are heavily disgusted about many things. Little things makes them feel filthy as a result of that, because something is growing in their members. Someone or somewhere has already gone in there, as it were, to break into them and try and seedify them with a seed of evil, which is a dark matter that produces fearfulness. And if they continue in that trajectory for a while, they will lose their self-esteem, then they become depressed, and then after a while they start struggling seriously with unlivening themselves, which is called suicide. And all these things begin to work together, because Satan is the one who's working on it, because they are hurting, they are disgusted, they are moody, they are upset. And all this means that something has happened to them. Something has happened to them. You see, Satan's end game for this is for this, so that at the end of the day they are wounded and damaged, so that they can have broken relationships throughout their lifetimes, and at the end of the day they will become highly promiscuous. And this is what Satan is working night and day to invert, because it's the inversion of those who are aesthetic, individuals who are exceptionally appealing, exceptionally visually kind, as it were, visually merciful, as it were, because they are carrying a substance or a housing for which God gave them to become their instrument of negotiation on the earth. And that instrument of negotiation just seems, you've heard of the time where someone say pretty privilege. That's actually what it is. That's just a word that someone came up with, and now it becomes very rampant in the worldly circles, but that is actually what it is. So it creates some level of privilege, but it's meant to be preserved. It's meant to be held in a classy, fashionable, elegant, holy, modest representation. And the modesty of it brings out a certain level of value, wherein men who are deserving of that type of relationship can now go after and seek their hand, as it were, from their family or from their father, and make sure they get the necessary approval before they are given, and now they say this is your wife or whatever. That is how it was originally meant to be. So I will leave you there. Thank you for watching another episode of Son of Elijah. I hope you were able to get something out of it, because I really was enjoying teaching it to you also. Please do like, please do subscribe and share. And please also, if you want to be a part of what we are doing, just go down on that button in the description section. You will see what it takes to give both locally and also our international givers. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a part of Son of Elijah. Thank you for being a part of our medium. We look forward to seeing you in our next episode of Son of Elijah. I will leave you there. Thank you and bye.